Hey everyone, welcome to POPXP. And before the show starts, make sure to click that subscribe button and click the bell to get notifications when we go live and we upload awesome new content. And don't forget, if you can, make sure to share our stream on all your social media outlets. We appreciate it, and thanks for helping us grow the POPXP channel. Hey, what's going on YouTube? It's the brain of the mainframe, Nile Scala here with POPXP, and joining me as always, the king of stream, my compadre, my co-host, Mr. Blevins is in the house. Blevins, how are you doing, my friend?
That's me.
That's you. Somewhere here. You're over there.
I'm doing great. Super excited for today.
Yes.
We have a guest that is somebody who's been there in different sections of success in my life without him probably knowing that he was there in these different times and periods of my life. As you know, and a bunch of other people know, I used to play Magic the Gathering professionally for a long time, and man, one of the mainstay artists, one of the most popular guys around at the time that I was working my way up that rank system was a little gentleman by the name of Matt Wilson. So let's go ahead and bring him on out and we'll get into that history. How's it going,
gentlemen?
Matt Wilson.
How you doing? Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, Matt, you may not know this, but you definitely were a mainstay at almost all the big events that I went to, and I did extremely well at. It was like if Matt Wilson was at the event, I knew that I was going to top 8 or top 4 the event. So it was pretty good. It was pretty good. I think we'll go ahead and get the sketches out of the way, but we'll pop up some of the sketches. So this first one is from 1998. And it's so funny too, because I know you don't remember this because you probably deal with like a billion people, but there was a big laugh about you giving her 6 fingers on her right hand, but you didn't give her 6 fingers. It's just the way that it looked. But anyway, it was
because of the rap. Yeah,
it was hilarious. It was hilarious. And then of course another sketch from around that same time period, that same year, was a dragon. Like I had to deal with dragons and angels, which you were pretty much the angel master at the time in all your paintings. So there's the dragon from 1998, and then this was in Origins in 2000, which you did a combo piece of an angel and a dragon. And then I met you randomly at Gen Con, which I missed you the first 2 times you were there. And I managed to catch you on the final day, and you did me a War Machine sketch, which was awesome. But anyway, just a little rundown memory lane, little rush down memory lane. But yeah, absolutely. So you definitely were a huge influence. You definitely changed the game. There was a couple of people that changed the game at that time period. You had Randy Gallegos, who came out with this new crazy art style, Matt Cavada, and then you guys were the big 3 on the block. Donato Giannicola had just dipped off from wanting to do work for Magic. Unfortunately, we had lost Quentin Hoover around that time. And you were the big, you did tons of artwork, and you had that neon look, that cyberpunk, that edge look to it. So if you don't mind, maybe you can give us a little rundown of your history leading in to being an artist, what drove you to that, and maybe how you got into Magic.
Sure. Well, I actually started in comic books back in the early 90s. So I lived in Southern California, in Orange County at the time. And there was a big boom in comics right there about the beginning of the 90s when Image Comics became a thing. And there were several Image studios in and around my area. So I got involved with a lot of folks just through the local comic shops that I used to frequent. And we started to form our own sort of just support group, working together, practicing, trying to find work in the comic industry. And eventually that led to me starting a small company, myself and a friend. It lasted for a couple of years. We got a few books out and had some fun with it. Lost a lot of money, as you do with comics back then. If you weren't one of the big studios. And then that led me to a place where I kind of wasn't sure what I was going to do next, but I was working part-time at a game store, and And through some folks, I was able to meet some other people at a company called AEG. And at the time, AEG hadn't made any games. They were known for a magazine called Shadis Magazine. And the thing that put Shadis on the map was, if I remember right, and hopefully I get this correctly, Shadis Magazine was the first publication to ever print, I believe, an aftermarket price guide for Magic cards, or something along that lines. I think it was called the Overstreet Guide or something like that. I wish I could remember. It's been a long time. And so they went from being sort of a small little indie game magazine to overnight they printed this price guide, and it skyrocketed their sales, and all of a sudden they were on the map with the magazine. And so I had gone out there. They were in Ontario, California at the time, and I went out and met with them. And I had a pitch for so the magazine. It was a gaming magazine. They mostly covered things like supplementary Dungeons and Dragons material. If you can think of it, it was kind of like an independent Dragon magazine in a way, but they also covered a lot of other games, and they had some comics in the back and stuff. And so I thought, well, I'm trying to find my next step with comics, and I went out there and I pitched a little fantasy serialized comic to them, and we met and showed them some other artwork. And while I was there, in a sort of cheeky way, because they were a little company, just a few guys. And I think there was more owners than employees at the time. And I said, I noticed you don't have an art director listed in your magazine. So if you need help with the magazine as an art director, I'm also available for that. So they called me the next day and they said, we're not interested in the comic, but we do need an art director. So if you want to start, we can bring you on. And so they brought me on. I think they were paying like $100 a week or something like that. So I was still working 3 other jobs, but that was the one that was exciting to do. So I went out there, and then part of why they brought me on was it wasn't so much to art direct the magazine, although I did art direct the magazine. But they knew that they wanted to get into making collectible card games, and they had an idea for a card game. The only thing they knew at the time, though, was that they were going to call it Legend of the Five Rings. And that concept was based off of a book called The Book of the Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi, who's the most famous Japanese swordsman that ever lived, right? And as it happened, that was something that I had known for many years. I'd read the book. And so I instantly could kind of see where they wanted to go with this, even though they didn't know what they wanted to do with the game, just that it was going to be a collectible card game. So I signed on to be an art director, and I had really no idea what I was doing. I had no art direction experience at that point. We had the comic book company, but I'd only really worked with myself as an artist, and had done some writing. And so I just sort of faked it, and we got into this, and I started contracting artists for the magazine and some other projects that they had. They make collectible card shoes that were wrapped with some sort of art print, and pretty neat at the time. And they were doing a lot of different things, especially around the CCGs, or TCGs as they're called now. And so we got into the Legend of the Five Rings development, and I worked with Dave Williams, who was the lead designer on the game, and DJ Trindle, who was the editor, and everybody did a bunch of different things. And so I spent the next few months after I got there developing the world of Rokugan, and the different clans and things that would populate the Legend of the Five Rings card game. So that's kind of where I got started.
This was at like 20, like you were at 23 or whatever, right?
I want to say 22. I think it was 1994. So
That's insane. That's insane. Like you're
quite a lot of
you're working at a game store and then creating one of the top 10 iconic card games of all time. Yeah, while you're just hanging out at a card shop.
It was a crazy time. I was doing a lot of different stuff. Yeah, I'd already started and failed at one company. So AEG was great. I worked there for a couple of years. We produced without having any experience or really knowing what we're doing. We managed to produce a bunch of card sets in the couple of years. Meanwhile, through the artists that I was meeting and going to conventions and things like that. I was getting in contact with other companies in the game industry, and I started to do more freelance work. So I would spend my days at AEG doing the art direction, being in contact with the artists, processing the artwork, working on the game development. And then at night I would go home and I would just paint. I'd paint all night. I'd either paint for L5R, or I'd paint for some other contract that I'd done. Back then I was working on, what would we have? There was Shadow Fist. There was, oh boy, I can't remember what else came up. There was a lot. So it was either artwork, I was either at AEG or I was doing artwork. And then after a couple of years, I got a phone call one day, and it was somebody from Wizards of the Coast, and they were looking for a new art director or assistant art director at the time for Magic the Gathering. And so it looked like a pretty neat opportunity. And I flew up to Seattle and met with the team there. And I think within 2 weeks I was moving. So
that was with Mark Rosewater still? Mark Rosewater was there?
Yeah, Mark was there. I worked with, at the time, the creative director on Magic was a good friend of mine named Chaz Elliott. Jesper Murfors was the
I was about to ask if Jesper was there as well. Yeah, I still talk to him on a pretty regular basis.
Yeah, yes, Jesper was actually the one who called me, and he and Chaz hired me. So when you see Jesper next, tell him hello for me.
Dude, I definitely will.
But that was the start of my adventure with Magic. So I moved up real quick, and then got to work on the next set. And I think at the time they were in the middle of concepting Weatherlight. They just finished Weatherlight. So I think the first set I worked on was Tempest. With and then after that I'm going to forget all the names or the orders that things go in. But so it was and that was really almost like the first real job. Working at AEG was fun. It was a startup. There was just a few of us guys, and it was just kind of all kinds of different craziness all the time, but we were having a good time doing it. And then
it's crazy to imagine AEG without a board game or without a game. It's hard to imagine the time that they were there without any kind of games going on.
Yeah, that was very much the beginning of it. And so, and at the time it was, I think there was maybe 5 of us and 3 owners in the company. And so it was a very small environment. And then I flew up to Wizards of the Coast and was suddenly in the middle of this very big corporation with, 450 people on campus there, 750 people worldwide at the time. And it was pretty daunting to be thrown into the middle of that. So again, I just kept faking it and
fake it till you make it.
I knew what I was doing. So while I was there, I would do the same thing. I art directed during the day. I was working at any one time with probably, I remember one time I counted, I think it was 83 or 85 artists that I was working with at one time on a set. Because these, they would do these annual blocks, and it was 3 sets a year. And the first set would be it would have starters and boosters. So it would be 300 cards for the first set. And then I think the next 2 expansions on that block would be another 150 cards or so. And so it was a pretty rigorous schedule of artwork where, you're getting 600 pieces of artwork a year. And that's before they start throwing in other things like Unglued or Portal or something where that wasn't even part of the original plan. So, and at the time they were also evolving from sort of a, I don't want to say generic fantasy, because they always had very great themes for the sets, but it was more of a theme, and they would give artists a lot of latitude in what they brought to that. And when I showed up there, the first set that they had really tried to create a story and a narrative around was Weatherlight, right? And that was
the story of the Weatherlight with Volrath, which you painted. I think you painted a Volrath, didn't you? You painted Popple.
I think he's real little in the Dream what was it called? Dream something.
Dream Hall.
Dream Halls, yeah. Yeah. So we had Mark Tadine and Anson Maddox were on as the concept artists, and we were working with several other people, and they were treating it more like what we would do with any sort of product today, where more like a film, where it starts with pre-production and all this concept art. We're going to pre-visualize the world, and then that information gets sent out to the artists, and the artists work from very specific descriptions and concept reference, rather than just a 5-line or 3-line description and are left to create whatever they want. They were trying to really create a cohesive vision, and so that was a great place to be at the time, to be part of that as it came together. And for me, it was very educational as well.
So was Anson part of the art direction as well at that time? He
and Mark Tadine were the two concept artists. So they spent their day just generating like piles and piles of amazing illustrations. Every once in a while I'd get a little time and I'd throw in with them. And then, meanwhile, meeting every artist that was in the industry at that time, I was in contact with, if they were willing to do contract work. And at the time, I mean, for freelance illustration, Magic has always been the best gig in town, right? They paid great. There's good benefits. As artists, you got invitations to get sent all over the world. So you could not beat being a Magic artist then. And so I made dozens, scores of friends through this, many that I still am in contact with today. And this was also before email was a thing. So I did all of my art direction back then on the phone and with a fax machine. And would fax me the sketches. I'd call them. And so I spent most of my day really on the phone with people, like talking. And that was great because I got to build relationships with these folks that really endured. And then I'd go to the conventions and then meanwhile back then I also had the benefit of being able to assign myself some artwork. So I'd pick pieces that I want to do, and I'd do my art direction during the day. I'd go home. I'd usually paint till 3 or 4 in the morning, get back up at 8 in the morning, head back to the office and rinse and repeat. And so I did that for a solid year, just a little bit over. And then I got an opportunity to go work with a company called FASA. And they're not around anymore, but they were the publishers of BattleTech and Shadowrun, Earth Dawn. And so, even though the art direction was fun, what I really wanted to do was focus on illustration. And FASA said, we'd like you to come on as a concept artist. So I took a big pay cut to go and just be able to focus on doing the artwork. And I did book covers for them and interiors. And then spent 2 years as the concept artist on a miniatures game called Vor, the Maelstrom. And unfortunately, Vor never had a real chance to take off. We got it out there, and it was a neat looking game. But FASA was evolving more towards interactive products at the time. And so after about 2 years, I saw things weren't probably going to last too much longer for me. I'm still great friends with Chaz Elliott, who's the creative director back there at Wizards of the Coast. And so they offered me a job to come back. And at first I was working in the miniatures department for them. And then through a series of events, I ended up working in the art studio for Wizards of the Coast at the time, and spent the next 3 years as the lead concept artist on Magic the Gathering. So for 3 years, I was the guy that was doing most of the pre-visualization on the creatures and characters and everything that you'd see in those.
That was during Urza Saga, or towards the end of Urza Saga.
It was more towards the end of Urza Saga, because I think Urza Saga, if I remember right, we went. It was Tempest, Stronghold, and then
Exodus. Yep.
And then we roll into Urza's, right?
Yeah, it was Saga Legacy and.
It kind of was around then, but then I think it was probably towards the end of Urza Saga, because I don't think I did the concept. I didn't do the concept artwork through that block.
I know that your name was definitely on the list of the people who were credited for the big foil boom, because Urza's Legacy was the first set that had the foil cards, and your name was definitely up there as part of the people that chose that. Which changed the game of Magic. The collectible version of that.
Yeah, I didn't have anything to do with the foil, but I might have had some cards that were foiled. So,
this was part of the decision-making process. But
yeah, I did some. I remember doing some packaging artwork for one of the Urza's releases, so I got to do the pop-up displays for that.
Nice.
Yeah, and so, oh boy, what were we working on? I remember the early sets that I was working on as a concept artist. There was a lot of elemental stuff, and I was recreating, what angels looked like, what different trolls looked like, and things like that for the sets. And for the life of me, I mean, if you name the sets, I'll probably remember.
It was Onslaught was the next. Yeah, Onslaught was the next set series after that, I think. Urza's Destiny was the third one. I just popped it up in my head. It was Legacy Destiny, then it was Onslaught.
So then
Legion was the big set that was all creatures. It didn't have any spells at all in it.
I think it was before. I think it was around the Onslaught stuff. When does what's his name? The big barbarian guy with the sword.
That was Kamal. That was Onslaught.
Yeah, okay. Onslaught. That was where I really started, because those were my concepts. So so I did the original concepts for Kamal and that whole sort of cast of characters that was in that set and the creatures. And there was other artists that contributed to that as well.
Like Kev Walker, I think, was the person who did Kamal, actually.
Well, he did the painting, but it was based on my concept. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's what I was saying. I'm sorry.
Yeah. How do you? I would do like line drawing concepts, and then because I had to do so many of them, I was just busting them out as fast as I could, and those would go out to the artists, and then the artists would make them look good. So
nice.
So that was 3 years of Magic for me, and then
I couldn't hear you now.
No, I was saying, Matt, how do you guys go about the concept art? Because with such vast universes that are created in these games, how was everything approached? Like, how did they approach you with the ideas of what they have, where you now have to take these ideas and create the images for them? Or how did how does the process work for gamers out there that don't know the behind the scenes?
So with Magic specifically, everything started with the R&D department, right? The team of game designers that were making the rules for Magic, and they would spend a lot of time creating what the next set was going to look like, and in terms of rules and the card interactions, and then they would translate these game rule concepts into some sort of fiction concept, right? Like they would take the rules and say, this is a creature card. It's going to be a flying creature. It needs to be heavily armored because it's, very powerful. And we think it's going to have a breath weapon attack or something like that, right? So it sounds like a dragon. Or they might say, we want it to specifically be a dragon. They were also working with a story department that was creating the narrative. And between the story department and the R&D, they would sort of create an overall brief for what this world is going to be like. What sort of societies are going to portray in there, what the different cultures are going to be like, and the different represented in the different colors. And then those would come to the art department as sometimes a couple lines of description about a creature. Sometimes there was something more elaborate, like they wanted to really create a whole culture of people that embodied the, whatever the philosophy was of the color or the story concept that they wanted. And then we would take those and make a checklist of like the different creatures and characters that we needed to create. And we'd start working on various concepts. And at certain stages, there would be a review process where they would say, we like this direction or we don't. We'd eventually have a presentation of artwork. It wasn't it wasn't too rigid. I mean, at times we'd go like, hey, I got this idea for this flying creature. And they'd say, well, he doesn't have wings. He can't fly. And I'd say, but he floats from magic or whatever.
Yeah.
And they'd say, no, if he flies, he's got to have wings. And so and then I'd go back to it and put some wings on it or change it.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes things would change halfway through. I did a painting for a card at one point that eventually became the Silver Seraph. It was an angel card. And but when the description was originally done, it was she was described as having, I think, bronze or gold armor, and had a really different description. At the very last minute after the painting was done, whoever was in charge of naming at the time said, okay, we named this one Silver Seraph. We said, this does not look like a Silver Seraph. It doesn't work. So I threw it on the computer and I went in and Photoshop and I started tweaking colors until the armor looked more silver and it matched the description for what they wanted. So sometimes there's some last minute adaptation around things there. We weren't given a lot of we were given a fair amount of visual freedom as long as it played within the requirements and constraints of what the game designers wanted for the setting. So, but that was it. It was a process of briefs, iteration, reviews, more iteration, and then eventually signing off on something once we ran out of time.
Now, when you're doing the paintings for these cards and stuff, another imagery, what are the time frames they typically give you to get them done?
Let's see. I think back then we probably would have 4 to 8 weeks per set.
Okay.
No, that's probably less than, because we were doing about 3 sets a year. So maybe 8 to 12 weeks. I think
8 to 12 weeks.
Yeah, the cycles generally were about, I think, 2 to 3 months, where in that 2 to 3 months, I would be, I wasn't assigning the artwork back then. At that point, I was just doing the illustration. But when I was art directing, it was, I'd say 2 to 3 months. We'd get the briefs, we'd break them down and figure out the first thing I would do back when I was art directing is I'd just start calling artists and say, are you available for the next 8 weeks? How many pieces can you take on? And I put a little number next to their name. And then after that, I'd take the descriptions and I'd start doling them out to people based on, what their interests were. Sometimes they had requests. Hey, I want to do, an angel, or I want to do goblins or something like that. You try and always give the artists what they're enthusiastic and passionate to work on, because I always felt you got their best work when it was something that they wanted to do.
Yeah.
Right.
And then after that, I'd send them descriptions. And then after that, sketches would start coming in. So we'd get sketches and we'd look and make sure the compositions were going to work in the card. Sometimes they get too complex. We'd have to simplify them a little bit, because at the end of the day, you're looking at something that's a little bit bigger than a postage stamp. Sometimes there wouldn't be wings on a flying creature and you'd have to put wings on it.
It floats. Dang you.
So, and then eventually the artwork would come in. Back then also, very different than how things work now, is that when I was working, actually was one of the first art directors, I think, that ever accepted any digital artwork.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
Everything was done traditionally back then. There was a lot of resistance to doing any digital work. And I remember the first artist that had fully digital artwork in Magic was Dermot Power. And he was working with me on a set. Dermot would later go on to become one of the greatest concept artists of the Star Wars prequels. So, and of course, all the work was being digital, and he did amazing stuff. And I fought really hard to be able to get his stuff into the set, because there was this sort of prohibition on digital artwork. They said things are going to go this way, so we got it in there. But it was neat back then, because the artist would have to send in the physical work. So at a certain point, after a couple months, I was getting dozens of FedEx packages every single day and opening these things up and taking the artwork out and put them up on display. And I'd send an email around the inner email. We had some sort of system, because this is before we were working with email.
It's like an intranet.
Yeah, like an intranet, exactly what it is. Yeah. And I'd send that out, and then it would be like a new art show every day in my office, and people would come down, and there was sign-off sheets, and so a representative from each of the departments, marketing had to sign off, R&D had to sign off, our department had to sign off. I think there was 5 or 6 different ones. They'd all sign off on the artwork, and then I'd take that and send it off to get photographed, and then the next round would come in the next day or over the next few days. So it was a really neat kind of experience to be able to hold every single one of those paintings in my hand, not really realizing just how important they were at the time. I mean, it was a piece of art and it was great. Got to sit and drool over the incredible artwork of all of these amazing artists, holding artwork from you name it, right? Like
yeah, absolutely, man. During that time, I mean, that was dude, that was the golden age. That was the golden age of book, because I think that was also about the time that Wizards started pushed to the more realistic, the realistic look instead of the cartoon. You saw the exit of people like Kaja and Phil Foglio and the Drew Tuckers. They got kind of pushed out because their stuff was cartoony, even though everybody liked that. That wasn't the direction that Wizards wanted to go anymore. And then you see like these new people which came out of nowhere, like Alan Rabinowitz and John Mattson, and I don't know if you did anything with them, but I'm just saying those are from the big, and then of course one of the guys who I think flew under the radar crazy was Kev Walker out of the UK. I mean, his artwork always incredible, even to this day is incredible.
He's always one of my favorites to work with. Yeah, he was great. And if you've ever seen his originals too, they were this big, right?
Yeah,
other people usually work a little bit larger. Kev did these; he made them only as big as he needed to for the artwork. They were these, like postcards, and they were just gorgeous, beautiful pieces.
Yeah, and also you had Therese Nielsen at the time, who was coming into, she was huge, and then I think around that time she got picked up to do almost all the artwork exclusively for the Star Wars miniature game, which was also done by Wizards of the Coast. But God, there was another person that so speaking of digital, I don't know if you're around, but like they call him the king of digital now, was Jason Chan. I don't know if you were around during that time period. That was way down the line, but yeah, Jason Chan is the one that kind of kicked the doors open, like just broke the floodgate for everybody wanting. He did the big iconic characters like Jace Mind Sculptor, and anyway, he just had this crazy, insane look, and everybody was like, "Oh my God, digital is where it's at." Still, a lot of people do it traditional, but he was definitely one of the ones.
Well, nowadays, we don't want. I mean, if somebody works traditional, they've got to turn in a digital copy of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's no processing of the digital works. I'm not sure how Wizards works anymore. I know like at Privateer, everybody that we work with works digitally. It's faster. It's more portable. You don't have any reproduction problems. Back then we had to photograph everything, color correct them, do a lot of image correction to make sure that they presented well. And the other thing that what digital did was it really expanded the world as far as the artists that were available. Because back when I was working on Magic, when I was art directing, and most of the communication was done over the phone. There was some email that was going on. I remember. We were only working with anybody who spoke English at the time, because there wasn't a way for us to communicate with anybody else, right? Mm-hmm. And digital artwork wasn't a thing, so it wasn't easy. Now we work with people all over the world in all different languages, and as long as we can communicate through an email and get a concept across, there are no barriers anymore. And so that's really what digital work did. And you don't have to. The expense of shipping the artwork isn't there anymore. Now it would cost so much to ship a painting, from the UK to the US, much less, from say Singapore, right? Or someplace where those costs really add up. So digital broke down a lot of barriers, gave a lot more opportunity for people to work in the fantasy and sci-fi illustration space. I think it elevated the game. I think no doubt. There's always been great illustrators, but now it's there's exponentially more. Right?
Mm-hmm.
The whole world's open.
Crazy, man. Yeah, that's that's pretty impressive, man. You're right there at the time. One of my favorite artists around the same time period went on to go work on like Red Dead Revolver and Grand Theft Auto. His name's Darren Bader.
Yep.
Yeah. So do you know Doug Tenaple as well?
I don't know Doug, no.
Okay.
But Darren and I go way back.
Tenaple created Earthworm Jim. They know each other. They all worked together when they were in California. But yeah, I mean Darren is awesome. I still talk to him sometimes whenever he's not super busy doing stuff. So, but that's awesome. That's crazy. Well, you want to tell us a little bit about how you got into Privateer Press, how that ended up happening? The War Machine, the Hordes, the Iron Kingdoms, the role playing games, everything that is Privateer Press.
Yeah. So while I was at Wizards of the Coast doing my second tour as the lead concept artist for Magic, around that time was when 3rd edition Dungeons and Dragons came along, and with that they introduced the open gaming license. And so there's a couple people at Wizards of the Coast at the time who on the side had little publishing companies, and were sort of positioning to get ready for this open gaming license and to make their own content. And I always loved making stuff. I didn't have designs on starting a new company. It wasn't something that I was interested in, but I was sitting around one day with a couple of friends, Brian Snowdy, who's another famous Magic artist, and another fan named Matt Strosik. He was a writer at the time and working in video games. And we just had this kind of crazy idea, like, hey, what if we did a D&D adventure, right, with this open gaming license? And we got to talking about it, and it was just kind of on a lark, but we started meeting on it and coming up with ideas, and Iron Kingdoms was born. And after a few months, we had put together a book, and I had started to develop this setting called the Iron Kingdoms, and telling the stories in it that would become the first sort of adventures that we would introduce. And so I was doing that sort of on the side, and Wizards of the Coast was very generous at the time that they allowed their staff to have these sort of side projects and do things. And I think that the OGL was ostensibly to bring more people to Dungeons and Dragons, right? The 3rd edition system. So
right.
All those things sort of benefited them and helped grow the brand, which was already a huge brand, of course. So let's see, from there, at the same time or around that time, I think it was, if I remember the order of the events correctly, right before I went back to Wizards of the Coast was when they were purchased by Hasbro. And so for the first couple of years, that didn't change much. That's sort of the honeymoon period. But around that 3rd year I was there, was when they started to make some structural changes in the administration of the company and just how it was going to work going forward. And so they decided that the art department was a cost center that was too high for what we're producing, and so they gave us about 6 months notice, let us know that they were going to roll off the art department. And they were, I want to say that Wizards of the Coast was always extremely generous. They took care of their staff, whether you were employed or whether you're on the way out. And so they gave us a lot of notice to wrap up projects, and then a good amount of severance. So, you had a lot of runway to figure out what the next thing was. And so we were in that first probably year, I think, of it was 2000 was when we published the first of what was called the Witchfire Trilogy. And it was a series of adventure modules, a connected campaign in which we started to develop the setting of the Iron Kingdoms. And from launch, they had done very well for us. We reprinted them multiple times. The distributors at the time considered them evergreen products, evergreen D20 OGL products. They wanted to keep them in stock all the time. We had a growing community of players that were eager to get their hands on more Iron Kingdoms material. And at the same time, we had decided to start exploring miniatures a little bit. They had commissioned a sculpt of a steam jack, which is a sort of autonomous steam-powered robot in the setting. Right. And we had just done that sort of on a lark as well, because it was something that you couldn't get. There were no real miniatures of fantasy robots at the time that you could get if you want to play in a sort of a steam-powered setting like the Iron Kingdoms. And so we thought we'd get one of these done. And about halfway as the sculpt was developing, we just thought we fell in love with the miniatures again. And I'd always been a miniatures enthusiast. I'd played miniatures games since I was 12 years old. And so it kind of reignited the passion again to get into those. And so we said, let's make a game out of this. So I started working on developing the game that would eventually become Warmachine, and was pretty close to sort of an alpha version of it by the time my tenure at Wizards of the Coast was wrapping up. And so I sort of transitioned from my role at Wizards into running Privateer Press full time. And it was just sort of a seamless sort of thing. Never stopped to do anything else.
No beats skipped, huh? No
stopovers. And so I think, let's see, probably, I don't remember exactly when I finished up. I think it was maybe middle or close to the middle of 2002, and then March of 2003 we released the first edition of Warmachine and the first 4 faction boxes, and it just took off from there. We didn't expect it. I never really had a plan for what we were going to do. There wasn't an ambition to grow or build a game company, but here we are 21 years later.
Right.
And we've made millions and millions of miniatures. Thousands of actual individual different sculpts and SKUs have gone into these. Today we've got 4 different miniatures product lines with Warmachine and Hordes, Monsterpocalypse, which is a big kaiju city brawl, Riot Quest.
The second time, the reboot.
Second time.
Reboot.
We got Riot Quest, which is a sort of a fun 4-player miniatures game that's kind of a parody of the Iron Kingdoms in some ways. And then most recently, Warcaster, which is our new sci-fi game that's distantly connected to the Iron Kingdoms, but very much its own thing. So,
any thoughts about bringing Voltron back during some Monsterpocalypse?
No, we did have fun with that one though. Yeah, the first time we did Monsterpocalypse, we had a great relationship with the folks who had Voltron. Did a really great Voltron edition of the game. So
yeah,
wow, very cool.
Yeah, I definitely still have mine. So
it's we thought they were all gone. I found a case of them in the warehouse just last year. It was great.
Nice, man. It's like a time capsule.
Yeah.
So something that was crazy. So you may not know this, but I owned the Game Store, which was the largest gaming store here in Arkansas, which is where I'm from. I closed the store back in 2018 to pursue other things, but yeah. So during the time, we did all the miniatures. Like we had the Warlord Games stuff with all the bolt action, Flames of War. But the 2 big ones, Infinity tried to get in there at one time, but they ended up falling off. Like they just couldn't get the rule sets together, I guess. But it was always Warmachine, Hordes, and Games Workshop with Warhammer. Always, like they were constantly battling. But during this, there was this 4-year time period, and I remember it because it was insane at the time. You guys were cranking out some of the best stuff you guys had ever done. You were actually on Twitter, like you would have a meeting, and you'd be like, take a picture of something. You're like, I'm not sure I'm supposed to share this, but here you go. It was a big deal. Everybody loved it. But they changed up the rules for Warhammer 40K, and man, it was the last straw for those people. And there was this huge flux, at least in my area, a huge rush of people to get into Warmachine Hordes. And man, like, I mean, it took off like gangbusters in my area. Like, I mean, there were so many people playing Warmachine, so many people playing like Troll Bloods was huge, Protectors of Minoth was massive, you know, like, and then you guys brought out the Colossals, which again blew people's minds, because, you know, they were used to having that stuff in the other games that really, you know, they're kind of for show. Sometimes they're a little too powerful or whatever, but, you know, the big dragons and stuff, which looked a lot like your artwork from back in the day too, which was crazy. But yeah, like, did you see that? Did you see that kind of stuff from where you were? I know that I know that may be a weird question, but did you see that you guys were kind of toppling Games Workshop at that time?
Well, we had, I'd say my focus was always on privateer. So, and that's what I was paying attention to, is just what we were doing. But we did see a lot of growth in terms of our business during that time. We were able to try a lot of
players on your team at that time.
Say again?
They were the best players on your team at that time.
We had some talented folks too. So we were trying a lot of different things. We tried, you know, we let our creativity lead us. Tried things like the Colossals. You know, the Colossals they actually took years for us to produce. We went through probably 2 or 3 failed attempts to just manufacture them at a price that we could sell them, and then eventually we found a way to do them when we started producing resin in our factory, because before that we had just done metal, and they were too big to produce in metal. And we tried to produce them overseas and couldn't get them made the way we wanted to. And so then once we took on resin production in our factory, and that's the thing at the time, you know, all the miniatures that we make were actually made in our own facility, and they are today as well. We went through a period where we did produce some plastic kits of different plastic materials, where we were experimenting with different things. Eventually we just came back to, we really thought that we produced the best stuff we produced was what we produced in-house and could control the quality level of. So, well, I think it was a neat time for experimentation and learning new
So
stuff.
all your minifigs are made here domestically?
All of our miniatures are made domestically right now, yes.
That's very cool.
Yeah, I should say with
the majority,
with a very few exceptions. Every once in a while we'll do you know, we did this Riot Quest game that we came out with about 2 years ago. We did a expansion set for it where there's a prop in it. It's a void gate, or a gate that's used in the game. You need a bunch of them, 6 of them. And we thought, well, we can make this internally, or we could send it out, because there's so many of the same miniature in the set, and we knew we were going to need a whole bunch of them, that it was going to overwhelm our production bandwidth for a while. So we had that one made in plastic, because it was one thing that we could just send out. And then that was also, it let us offer it at a better price to people as well. But otherwise, yeah, 99% of our miniature products are made internally up in Woodinville, Washington.
One of the coolest things about your game, like there's a lot of people that try to produce miniature games. Like, you guys were the first, and I think probably even the only company, even at this time, to have a real deal starter set. Like, you buy the starter set and you can play with everybody else with just this starter set. You know, play the full game at the full level, because, you know, like, again, when you deal with the point system, you know, like with other games, you know, everybody always wants to play these high-end games, but your starter sets were perfect, and you got all the pieces that you need, like all the different characters for the different parts and the positions. So I mean, applaud to you on that too. I mean, like how great was that? You guys, it's like you guys actually cared about the customer and knew what the gamers were going to need to get going, and provided a full, you know, a full method for them to play the game, like right out of the box.
Yeah, you know, miniatures games they're not easy games to get into, especially if you don't have any experience with them. There's a lot of reasons to sort of shy away from them. First of all, you get the pleasure of putting them together and painting them, rather than, you know, being able to open the box up and just start playing something by itself. They they demand that that you're a hobbyist, or at least are going to enjoy enough of that hobby process to put in the effort. And once you do, you've got a pretty big investment in your army, not just in terms of the dollars that you paid for it, but you put your time into it and your effort, and and the people who really are passionate about it put a lot of their creativity into it. And that's kind of the neat thing about making hobby miniatures games, is that we, in a way, we're giving people a canvas to be expressive and sort of project their own creativity and ideas into what they're doing. Similar in the way that a role-playing game lets you create a character and a narrative around that character, and that becomes something that you're very emotionally invested in, especially after you spend a lot of time. And other games like board games and trading card games don't necessarily give you that same sort of attachment to the things that you're playing with. But after you create an army, especially after you've collected it over months or years, even, you've painted this thing, you've customized it, it's become something that's uniquely you. Nobody else has an army like that on the table, no matter what. And so there's a lot of identity, I think, that gets wrapped into that experience. But what we tried to do with the starters was give people an easy way into what could otherwise be a very intimidating and complicated experience. So we had a couple different starters at that time. I think that you're talking about, we were into the second edition, the Mark II version of the game.
Yeah, definitely.
And with that one, we were able to offer very economically priced starters with most of what you needed to play. I think at the time you still had to grab a few 6-sided dice and a tape measure, but otherwise you're ready to go. We also produced both in the second and third editions of the game, we produced some pretty robust 2-player starter sets that included a lot more miniatures. That might be what you're talking about, where that was, it was everything. It had the dice, had the miniatures.
Both of them, the individuals and the 2-player starters. 2-player starters were great as well. So
yeah, so there was a few different ways, and we with the single player starters, even though it was only 4 or 5 miniatures, the objective there was to be able to open that box up and put a few miniatures together and play a game and get that feel of what it was like to play Warmachine. Even though you're playing with 5 miniatures, that's not the same experience that you're going to get when you have, say, 20 or 30. You learn the game, you learn the fundamentals, you start to understand how you would expand your army and grow into these larger battles.
And speaking a little bit about RPG, I tell you what, I think that's a great way for us to segue into your Kickstarter.
There is a world where magic and technology have merged to create new arcane sciences, where steam-powered automatons roam city streets and dominate battlefields, where ancient empires clash with young nations, feral tribes rail against an encroaching industrial revolution, where dragons reign over civilizations like gods, and where gods wage unending war from the afterlife and beyond. It is a world rebuilding itself in the wake of an apocalypse, rife with adventure and intrigue, filled with unlikely heroes, diabolical villains, extraordinary monsters, and the mysteries of the arcane. An RPG setting 20 years in the making. Its previous editions, the recipients of 16 prestigious Emmy Awards. And now, for the first time ever, it can be experienced using the 5th edition of the most popular role-playing game system ever. The Iron Kingdoms Requiem. Forge your legacy in the world of full metal fantasy.
Want to tell us a little bit about that, the Iron Kingdoms Requiem?
Yeah, so it's kind of neat. We're coming full circle after 20 years. So we've explored the Iron Kingdoms in role-playing games 3 times. It's where Privateer started, back with the 3rd edition OGL. We did a version of the setting or the RPG several years ago. They had a proprietary system that we had created, which I think has become known as the 2D6 system. It actually works very similar to WARMACHINE and had a lot of compatibility. So if you knew how to play WARMACHINE, it was easy to pick up the RPG. And then it's been a few years since we had visited the role playing.
Look at that.
But
that's such an insane picture. The dragon blasting the train. Yeah, I mean it's so impressive.
Thank you. The 5th edition of Dungeons and Dragons, with the 5th edition, I should say, they again introduced another open gaming license, and so we saw the opportunity to revisit the setting and both bring folks back who were previous explorers of the Iron Kingdoms, as well as introduce it to a new group of people who had a lot, in many cases, had just come to role-playing games through 5th edition for the first time. Mm-hmm. And as I'm sure because everybody knows, Dungeons and Dragons in 5th edition is experiencing a renaissance right now. I can't even tell you how many people that I've talked to in the past year that have never played role-playing games, that are my age and older, never even knew what Dungeons and Dragons was before COVID, and now they play weekly online with friends and family and everything. So it's really been it's had a big resurgence, and the OGL has given opportunities for lots of publishers to tap into that 5th edition market and bring their various worlds and settings and ideas to a new audience. And so we launched this February, I think, after working on it for much of the past year, and it really took off for us. We were overwhelmed by the amount of support that we got, and it's real neat with platforms like Kickstarter and the Pledge Manager that you get to see like where your audience is coming from around the world, and who they are, if they've had experience with your projects before. And it was great because we had almost 7,000 backers for Iron Kingdoms Requiem, which is the new edition, and half of them were people who were veterans of the Iron Kingdoms, and the other half had never even seen a Privateer Press product before.
You guys you had a very successful campaign here.
Absolutely.
And if you ever take the time to explore some of the POPXP network, Matt, you'll see that our heart in what started this channel was actually crowdfunding.
Absolutely.
We started off as crowdfunding comics. That was just a series that we did, and that was the name of the channel. Then we evolved into POPXP, and we have multiple series now on this network. But they always go back to crowdfunding in some way or form.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's where our passion is: independent creating, doing your own thing and funding your stuff. And it's cool to see, these outfits, these sites being used and utilized for so many different levels of entertainment and media and consumption. And, just like you do with your game, I mean, you guys did great here. I mean, you're approaching $600,000 on this. You have almost 6,900 backers. I mean, that's incredible. And let me ask you, I mean, with crowdfunding, has this platform been something that has exceeded your expectations on how your products perform?
Yes. I mean, yes and no. In some ways, it's been what we expected. With Iron Kingdoms Requiem, it actually was. We had a much greater response than we were even expecting going into it. Mm-hmm. We were ambitious and hopeful with it, but like I said, kind of blown away by just the amount of support that we ended up getting. It's an interesting time in the tabletop industry. It's very different than it was 5 years ago, even 3 years ago. There are a lot of different publishing companies, a lot of people participating here. There's some very large, dominant companies, and it's become a space that's difficult to differentiate yourself in. When we got into games 20 years ago, there weren't nearly as many publishers or miniatures game companies or even RPG companies. Over that time, it's grown exponentially, and not in small part because of crowdfunding, which is which has given an opportunity for a lot of people to bring their ideas, put them in front of a lot of people, and succeed with them. It's great. It's an amazing platform. Kickstarter in particular has become an amazing showcase for new products because of the way it is able to spotlight different projects. It's really the best place to get your project shown, right? You can you can advertise, and you can use social media, which we do all of those things, but it's Kickstarter that really brings the audience to the projects. And so what we've seen is a lot of growth in our various product lines by exposing them through the Kickstarter platform. And this year in particular, this past year, we had entered 2020 with the intention of doing a Kickstarter for our new miniatures game, Warcaster, and probably one other product. But when the pandemic hit everybody and it started shutting things down, Kickstarter became the way, because we were in a situation where our industry was locked down, our distributors were locked down. There wasn't a way to bring products to market easily, but we had to keep moving. We still had a company. We had a building with a lease and overhead and people who need to take care of their families. And so we very quickly adapted to that. And so Iron Kingdom's Requiem was the fourth Kickstarter that I personally built and ran in the past year.
That's also an age of pivot. Yeah, it was also we were able to pivot so easily.
It wasn't easy.
Oh, well, how about this? It seemed easy. How's that? From outside, it seemed easy.
When it look easy, that's great.
Well, I'll tell you what, when you have a product that's so entertaining in the pandemic time too, right? We became like the year of Zoom, when you're doing things. I mean, role-playing games and stuff. I mean, you can do that via Zoom or other Skype or however you want to set it up. And I mean, it's like for you guys, it was probably, it probably benefited because like you said, you had people coming out of the woodwork. So, I mean, you've been in the industry a long time. I mean, and I'm sure you've seen this as well as, somewhere at some point in the 2000s, probably when the Marvel universe really struck. I mean, I hate the term geek culture, nerd culture, so I don't think it's the right terminology, but, that became accepted, right? So people, again, were coming out of the woodwork like, actually, I do like doing that. Or, I play that with my cousin. I don't tell anyone, or, I am a Trekkie, I don't care. I did that. I was like, screw it, I'm a Trekkie, but I mean, you've had to have seen like these great spikes, to really help out the business and growth. But as a businessman in a developer, do you see this as a good thing and as a bad thing? Because now it brings in more competition.
It's different. I don't think competition's a bad thing. I think that if you look at the quality of games made today compared to 20 years ago, oh my God, everything is so good these days, right? Like, like I said, it was easy to stand out 20 years ago. These days, it's the best time in history to be a gamer. Because whatever you want is out there, and people are doing a great job with it. So I think if anything, it's elevated the game. It's elevated the quality across the board. There's a lot of people trying to figure out like what's the next thing that we can do. How can we do it better? And that's just better for everybody. I think that every entertainment industry, any industry in particular, can get to a place where it sort of stagnates, right? There was a period, we all remember the 80s for film and then like the last decade, 15 years, right? But nobody talks about how great movies were in the 90s, right? It was like we were kind of coasting at that point. And eventually there was a new, inflection point where all of a sudden things start getting better. And so, and I think that that every industry sort of cycles that way. Right now, we're in a glorious stage of creativity with games where people are experimental. They're trying new things. Quality keeps getting better. We've always liked trying to sort of change whatever we were doing, right? Not just do the same thing, but let's try something new. and see where that takes us, see what people respond to. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and that's just part of being in a creative enterprise. So overall, though, I think it's a great thing. We've really embraced Kickstarter crowdfunding as definitely the way of the future for us. I think in some ways we're a bit late to the party, but at the same time, it's a good party to be at. So,
well, I tell you what, I think it's awesome to hear you speak so highly of Kickstarter, which I think Kickstarter is incredible. Like, and I've told people this, every time we have people on. But I will tell you, as Nile told you before, like one of our big intros into all this was, crowdfunding, like crowdfunding books and crowdfunding projects and stuff like that. And one of the biggest questions that we always have was when someone chooses Kickstarter, it's like, well, did you look into Indiegogo, or did you decide, what made you want to go with Kickstarter over Indiegogo, and vice versa? Because like I said, there's a huge, especially now, there's a huge group that wants to push, just for Indiegogo. So what was it that kind of made you want to go with Kickstarter over Indiegogo, or was there anything you just saw this? You're like, hey, look, this is what I want. There's no need to look at this other one.
Well, we've been using Kickstarter for a number of years. So, I mean, we went real heavy this past year, but I think we're into our 7th project at the moment. So it's been something that we've been using for a while. So I would say, for us, the decision is largely familiarity with the platform, and then as well, just the sheer audience size, right? The audience size is significant. We're there for the exposure more than anything, right? I mean, that's the purpose of crowdfunding, is to get as many eyeballs on your project as possible. So, so you can expose it to as many people as might be interested. And Kickstarter, particularly with the level of success that many game projects have seen on that platform, just seemed to make it kind of like the obvious choice of where we're going to take something when we're looking to bring it to a large audience.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think for tabletop gaming products and all of those things, I think Kickstarter is the way to go.
Dude, I love Kickstarter.
If you were telling me you were producing comics, I would be like, hey, you should try Indiegogo. I think they just have a far better platform for a comic book creator. It's both worlds create escapism and whatnot, but I think for the creation of comic books and that stuff, I think Indiegogo's far better. But when it comes to tabletop games, miniatures, role playing, all that stuff, my number one choice would be go to Kickstarter. I think you guys made the right choice 100%.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's again, it looks amazing, and it just looks so cool. And I've never been huge in the world of gaming and stuff, but my boy Blevins here has really started to change the tune for me. Plus one of our other POPXP family members, Adam Lawson, who's done a lot with tabletop gaming and role playing stuff. Both of them have really started to open up our eyes, and we really want to start pushing that world as well. Because it's incredible what your guys put together. I mean, I'm looking at this stuff and I'm like, mind is blown. Like, just so immersive. And I have so many friends into it. I'm like, dude, you have to do it. You have to do it. I'm like, I don't have the time, but I would love to.
It's a big world to explore. I mean, gaming in general,
incredible. I mean, so much respect on what you put together. I mean, you really are creating an immersive world that the players can adapt and change as they go, but what you hand off to them is incredible. And just the miniatures and the customization, I mean, the whole thought process into everything, I mean, has to be such a high, just a roller coaster of emotions and everything of when you're coming up with new products. I mean, it's got to be such an incredible feeling, though, to at the end of the day say, here's our new world you can explore.
It is great. I have to say, there's not been a single day in 21 years that I've been bored about going to work. Right? It's never boring. We get to have some crazy conversations, more about things that aren't real than things that are real.
Yeah.
We're at Privateer, all of our games, we're very big into the storytelling as well. So so there are some big epic stories that drive these games. Often many of the developments for the games are a result of story beats or conclusions to stories. So that's a big part of the experience, and we're always trying to find new ways to make it as immersive as possible, so that when you're playing these battles out on the tabletop, you're watching the movie in your head, and it's amazing.
Mm-hmm. And Blevins, I'm sorry, I think I cut you off. You're about to explain something about Adam.
I was gonna say Adam, has a role playing game, and he was able to set up his own miniatures. He was one of the people that helped get Critical Role started in tabletop, and the Geek and Sundry people. So yeah, he pushed it. And I mean, again, it is insane. Like, you have to have a special mind for that stuff, and it's again, man, congratulations on all your success. I mean, definitely well deserved, well earned too. I mean, you worked hard to get to this point, man. So just congrats on all your success. And we've had you on here now for about 1 hour and 10 minutes, which is usually a little longer. But I guess before we go, I have one more what if question for you, which we want to leave you with. So, being in the gaming industry for so long, again, Magic the Gathering, L5R, even dealing with some stuff with AEG back in the day. If it was an ideal world and you were able to get a property that you don't have, like maybe even some from Age, like maybe Shadowrun or, maybe Battletech or Crimson Skies or something along those lines. If you could take over a project and redo it now under the Privateer Press name, what would it be? And, why would it be Shadowrun?
Shadowrun's amazing. I think that's in very good hands. Aren't they bringing in a new edition or something?
Yeah, they are.
To it, and it looks good. So I think that I'm going to leave that one with the experts. Oh boy, that's a tough question. I wish I'd seen it coming. I think that it's not a gaming property, but I will say that if I could get any license in the world, I always wanted to bring Ghostbusters into Monsterpocalypse.
Oh, that would be so cool.
But
man, I bet you could make that happen. Like, doesn't Cool Mini or not have that?
I'm not sure. I know that there's been a few different game expressions.
Yeah.
I just wanted a reason to make an Ecto 1 and a
That's right.
Mellow Man.
There you go.
God. Dude, that's awesome. That's a good choice, man. That's a good choice. Well, Scully, you got anything else?
No, I mean, this has been fantastic, learning about, Privateer Press, and, everyone out there, please head on over to the Kickstarter. It is still available up for pre-order for Iron Kingdoms Requiem. You guys can still back this essentially by heading over to the pre-order link right here on the screen. And also, if Privateer Press is new to you, or you want to explore more what they have, please head right on over to the website. You will find this website listed in the description of the show right under this window that you're viewing us at. So head down there, and also while you're there, make sure to click that subscribe button and smash that bell to get notifications when we go live and we upload awesome new content like this interview with Matt Wilson with Privateer Press. I mean, everything you have here is fantastic. Just so much. I mean, I was just looking at, like all the different product lines and everything you guys have. I mean, again, just so immersive. I don't know how your head hasn't exploded yet in creating all of this
that is the
awesomeness. But yeah, everyone, head on over. And if you haven't, delved into the world yet, start right here. Start with products. Pick your poison. All right, and then head over and find a store. Do whatever you have to do. If you need help or some guidance, please comment below, and we will gladly help you out. But this is great. I really appreciate you coming on, Matt. We're really diving into the world of gaming on the POPXP network, and this has been an amazing introduction to your company, your games, the heart you guys put into everything, and just listening to your story of someone who's genuinely sounds like genuinely in love with what he does. Where you're like you said, in 20 years, you're not going into work frustrated or in the traditional sense of a frustrated employee or business owner. Yeah, but absolutely fantastic. This was great. Blevins, as always, thanks for getting a great guest on the show. And
I'm actually just super excited that I just happened to catch you on the right day, I guess. It was awesome. Yeah. And again, I know your schedule is so hectic, and I appreciate you taking time to do this. And I hope you had fun as well. But man, dude, just absolutely thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you.
It's my
Fantastic.
Incredible.
And any new product lines you guys have going on, anything you want to talk about, promote your team or whatever, if you ever want to come back on, we also do live streams. This way we can bring the audience in as well. And we'll do like if you have another campaign going, we can do the campaign live and, try to show off product, this and that. And I guess it's kind of like an infomercial, if you want to call it, but it's fun. Everyone has a good time, So you guys are more than welcome to do that, and we'll keep an eye out to see if you guys have anything come up, so we can always extend the reminder of that.
We will always have something else coming up really soon.
Awesome. Well, Matt, have a great night. Blevins, as always, I'll see you on the next stream. And everyone out there, please, hope you're enjoying the show. Click that subscribe button, and we will see you all on the next one.
Thank you both.
That's right.
Have a good night.
Hey everyone, thank you for joining us on POPXP. If you haven't already, make sure to click that subscribe button and also click the bell for notifications when we go live and we upload some awesome new content. Also, don't forget to head on over to Twitter and follow us at the POPXP and over on Instagram at the POPXP. Thanks again everyone, and we'll see you soon.